So, Natalie, welcome to Positive Vibes.
Thank you, Yasmine. It's great to be here.
I am so excited to have you here and to tap into your wealth of knowledge and to discuss your new book, Move, Think, Rest. So, we will get into all of that. But I have to say, I think we must read a lot of the same books because as I was reading yours, I was thinking of Oliver Berkman's 4,000 Weeks, Celeste Headley's Do Nothing, Jenny Blake, Seth Godin, of course. In fact, Seth Godin's blog was how I found out about your book release.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Wonderful.
yeah,
Thank you, Seth Godin.
yeah. So, so you shout out to Seth Godin, and my listeners hear me talk about him quite a bit. Folks, I will link to Seth's blog as well as to Natalie's book because it's great. There's also been Essentialism, Greg McEwen, Cal Newport. My listeners have heard me talk about his classic deep work and his most recent book, Slow Productivity. There's just so much overlap. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi and his work on flow and creativity. So tell me, why did you write this book, Move, Think, Rest, now? What drove you to do that?
Well, we might say that Move, Think, Rest is the atomic habits for this portion of the 21st century. I wrote the book for several reasons. The first was reckoning with my own personal moment of burnout. Retrospectively, I was a professor for 16 years, and I hit a wall in kind of probably 2 years before I decided to retire from academia. It was a Wednesday afternoon around 5:15 p.m. I was walking back from the photocopier machine with a armful of folders, and I heard someone say out loud in a very terse voice, "I don't want to do this." And shockingly, the voice was my own. It was super shocking because this was my dream job. I was doing my work of passion and super meaningful. I was the founding director of a strategic design MBA. And I had experienced other moments, inflection points in my life where I had to reckon with, okay, something needs to shift. So I knew that was going to be hard work because to deal with your intuition, this inner knowing that something has to change, even though you don't know what's next, requires a lot of reflection, honesty, and the ability to ask for advice and help. But for me, it was totally worth the reckoning. And it led to me building my business full-time figure eight thinking. The second driver was in the early years of building figure eight thinking, I would get invited into companies to help them build cultures of innovation. And as a creativity strategist, my work is all about helping companies and leaders connect the dots between creativity and business results for sustainable innovation. And I would have these sidebar conversations with some leaders and folks on teams where they would confide in me that they were kind of dying a slow death at work, and they were really hoping that the work that we were doing would really stick and it would become ingrained in the culture. So those were the two observations personally, and then with people with whom I worked. And then as an entrepreneur, you have to do a lot of mental flexibility and fortification, a lot of good positive self-talk. So I became very self-aware personally about how I was doing, how I was showing up in my work. And I was observing that when I would procrastinate, step away from the desk and empty the dishwasher or go for a little walk. When I would return to the work at hand, something that had stymied me would click into place, or I would just feel more refreshed and focused and have clearer thinking. So, for all those reasons, I began to delve further into this idea of initially, I was calling it invisible work, but I did not want to detract away from the work of feminists who have talked about women's unaccounted for, unpaid for work. And my editors and I, we landed gradually on this title of Move, Think, Rest.
So tell us about that framework because you set forward an entire framework. You spell it MTR, move, think, rest, but you pronounce it motor, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, tell
So
us.
the motor framework is a human-centered operating system to help us flourish. And it matters now more than ever because of unprecedented burnout, I think the burnout stats are hovering in the low 70% tile, where 70% of people are reporting having experienced some form of burnout. There's about a $300 billion cost to American businesses due to burnout because of absenteeism, turnover, high turnover, knowledge transfer. But because of burnout, ubiquitous technology, and new rules for remote work, now more than ever, we have an opportunity to shift the way we think about work and to redesign it. So the move, think, rest framework is not a linear process. It's not first you move, then you think, then you rest. That's not what it is. It's very situational. It is very integrative. And the movement part is really about movement hygiene and identifying ways that you can integrate movement throughout your day. I know you as a physician are really clear that we are designed to move. We're not designed to be sedentary. The spinal cord is an extension of the brain, of the medulla oblongata. And so if we're sitting for long periods of time, and we're hunched over the computer, then we are constricting blood flow, which means we are restricting oxygen to the brain, which ultimately means we're not doing our best thinking if we are knowledge workers, right? Um, the thought part is not only about clear cognitive rational thinking, it's about what leads to that clear rational thinking. And that turns out to be our ability to have backcasting and forecasting. Backcasting is about memory and reflection and metacognition. Forecasting is about dreaming and curiosity and inspiration. And it turns out that when we allow those different neural synapses in different regions of our brain to really tap into the backcasting and forecasting, then our cognitive rational thought actually is more interesting, is clearer, and that's how we do our best thinking. And then the rest part is about intermittent resting. It's about designing micro breaks into the day, but scaling out to even thinking about how might you design your own sabbatical. And it doesn't have to be 6 months away or 5 months away or a year away. It could be, you could inch into it. It could be one day every 3 months that you design your own sort of sabbatical. But these spaces of these times of liminal space to be more in structure, to not have an agenda, to do the movement, thought, and rest. Again, it's very integrative, will actually help you to show back up to your work in a much more revived way.
Now, how is a sabbatical different from a vacation?
Well, good question. I actually did my very first writing sabbatical to write the book Move, Think, Rest upon my husband's urging. He had a good point. He said, "Babe, do you think maybe you should go somewhere for a week or two where you can really focus on the writing?" I thought, well, no, I have a beautiful home office. I'll be fine. But then I thought, he's got a point, and it would be practicing what I preach. The first step for me was to mark off 2 weeks on my calendar. I said no to keynotes. I said no to meetings and calls. The second step was I asked five individual friends, texted them separately, and said, I'm going on a sabbatical from May 13th through May 28th. I'm envisioning myself waking up every day and writing from 8 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, and then walking into turquoise water. Does anyone have any suggestions? And one of those friends, within 45 minutes, replied back, my beachside condo in Miami. And I was said, yes, please, thank you. And so she leased that to me for a very reasonable fee pricing. And the difference between a vacation and a sabbatical is that there is some intentionality about the rest. So, some people go on kind of, I call them sabbaticals, they don't, but we've heard increasingly people who will take a weekend just to read fiction, right? They will check into a hotel and all they're doing is reading, right? I think that's a beautiful way to design your time. It's a type of vacation, but it also is a bit more, has a bit of more of a focus. I think of vacations as being slightly more open-ended, not necessarily connected to a a professional goal that you might have. So for me, that writing sabbatical was connected to the goal of getting a nice chunk of the book written. My goal was to write 3 chapters. I got 2 chapters written, so not too shabby. And in the process, I experienced a time away that was both expansive and also helped me to get really focused. I will say there's something a bit romantic initially about thinking about having a sabbatical somewhere, again, where I was walking to turquoise water every day. But the scary part was I had to write. Like now there's like I had to do what I said I was going to do. But I really encourage your listeners to experiment with what that might look like for them.
Yeah, and I want to go back to a few things that you said earlier on. One is the disconnect that we tend to see between the value placed on creativity versus, which there really shouldn't even be a versus there, versus productivity. And you mentioned this a lot in the book. There are actually stats, I think, that listeners who get this book, it's on page 95 and really throughout the book, but 95 is the page I'm looking at. 80% of people believe unlocking creativity is critical to economic growth, but 75% of respondents are pressured to be productive rather than creative at work. Why are they not the same thing? Why did we get this huge disconnect in the minds of, I don't know, working leadership perhaps? Or, could you just speak to that?
Yeah, that's such a good statistic to pull out from the book because I think that what that statistic reflects is that the ways we've been thinking about productivity are about tasks, it's about outputs versus impact. And creativity is really an orientation more towards impact. And it also gives us permission to fall in love with the process, which can be quite messy. It may not have an answer or a solution right away. And you pointing that out is a good opportunity for me at this point in our conversation just to kind of point out that when I was writing the book, I also spent some time unpacking the historic ways that we've thought about productivity and the more traditional ways we've thought about it. So the ways that we currently think about productivity, which are about it's about efficiency, output, um, speed, we measure what we can see, is really a relic of the first industrial revolution, which was tied to factory work, which was an incredible innovation that shifted the way families were structured. It shifted transportation. It shifted the primacy of the church and the priest and the minister versus the corporation and the company, right? So it was a really incredible driver in the ways civilization was evolving at that time. The challenge is that we actually can work differently now because one of the things that happened as a result of the first industrial revolution is that humans became a bit mechanized. They sometimes became a cog in the machine, a cog in the wheel. And so sorry, yeah.
A human resource. That's where that
Yes.
came from, didn't it? Hmm.
That's right. That's right. Frederick Winslow Taylor and all of his work about really spending a lot of time in quantifying speed of humans at work, standing adjacent to the machine. The alternative way that I think might look at our work is instead of asking, how might I be more productive this week, or how might my team be more productive this quarter? What if we asked a different question? What if we asked, what might I cultivate this week? What might my team cultivate this quarter? And the difference is that I was really curious about what did societies look like before the first industrial revolution? And before the first industrial revolution, most societies were agrarian-based economies. Now, I am not romanticizing farming. Farming is an incredibly challenging and adaptive mode of work. I mean, people talk about VUCA environments that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous in corporate environments. Try farming. Try reckoning with Mother Earth. That's a real VUCA environment. But in a cultivation environment, I said, what if we pulled forward the MO of cultivation to the 21st century, where it's a both and model, where we value the solo practitioner and the collective. We value speed and quick spurts of growth, but also slow. And we value uh, measuring what we can see, and that's important, that matters. But also, we understand that there's a lot happening when things are dormant, when we need to sleep on it, when we need things to percolate. So, that both and model is something that we actually can use as a heuristic, as a metric for designing work, because we have technology that is increasingly taking over basic tasks. The so what behind all that tech is spaciousness, is liminal space, is time to reflect, to think more critically, to have eyeball to eyeball conversations, to collaborate more. So the that 80/70 quote that you referenced, there's a gap analysis between people really desiring and wanting to be able to express themselves more creatively, but then not really being given the space and time, even though I think there's another statistic that something like 75% of business leaders acknowledge that creativity is essential for market competitiveness. And we now need to give space and time for people to be creative.
And we're now going through another revolution, and you touch upon this as well. You know, we might just call it the AI revolution. And what will the role of humans be in this new age?
Well, I actually think we're not in the midst of a tech revolution. I know that sounds counterintuitive, or what are you talking about? But we're actually in the middle of a human revolution. And I say that because technology is a tool, whether the technology is a pen, a calculator, a knife to cut butter, technology or AI, technology is a tool. And the opportunity we have, if we play our cards right, is to use the technology to leverage what makes us uniquely human. And what makes us uniquely human is our imagination, our capacity for curiosity, our intuition, human consciousness, the ability to sense make. We are sentient beings. We're not only collecting data from a rational perspective, the role of the emotions. I love the work of Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett and her book, How Emotions Are Made. So this moment in time where our lives and our works are saturated with technology, and it's a bit overwhelming to discern what is the tech that we should be incorporating, how do we incorporate it, what do we leave on the table. It is overwhelming, but what that's a signal to do is to pause and to dial it back, not from getting infatuated with the technology, but what do I want? What do I need? How do I want my day to look and feel? And dial everything back from there. If it's an organization, what do our clients need? How do we want our clients to feel? How do we want the services and experience and the products we are delivering to land, instead of just copy pasting what our competitors are doing? Dialing it back from the needs of our clients is a vantage point to use the technology, as well as dialing back from what our employees need.
Yeah, and you know, Natalie, as you talk about all this, I'm reminded that you have a very interesting and rich background in a number of different areas, you know, including anthropology, fashion, design, education. Can you tell us more about that background and how it has influenced your work?
Yeah, my background is in cultural anthropology. I studied cultural anthropology in college, and Yasmin, you and I were saying your husband is an anthropologist. It's for me, having studied cultural anthropology, it is the gift that keeps giving, because it really equipped me with a lens of how to understand society, how to ask questions from the worm's eye view versus the bird's eye view. You dive a little bit more deeper into the quagmires of society and societal challenges and opportunities, and you learn to do deep observation, qualitative research, and question asking. My work in the fashion industry, initially as an entrepreneurial hat designer, and then in global apparel sourcing. I worked for a division of the Limited brands. You know, fashion was a sector that really exposed me to the role of trends, the role of forecasting. And the fashion industry, it is a business. People who've never worked in fashion think it's either glamorous or they think it is frivolous. It is neither. It is a business, which requires logistics and technology and business acumen. So I learned all of those things working in the fashion industry. And then my 16-year period of teaching as a professor really fueled the nerd in me, and it fueled my love of learning. I think the best teachers really love to learn. You have to always be learning so that you can understand the better ways, the more interesting ways to teach and to deliver content and help your students convert information into knowledge in ways that are relevant to them and meaningful to them. And so all of those experiences in the fashion industry, in education, that background in cultural anthropology really converged to the work that I do now as a creativity strategist, which is to help teams, companies, individuals connect the dots between creativity and business results. And I really, the umbrella that kind of frames my work is my wonder rigor theory. It's to help people understand that creativity is not something that only artists or designers are great at. Creativity is your ability to toggle between wonder and rigor to solve problems and deliver novel value. And if you think of it as this toggling between wonder and rigor to solve problems, because it's a lot simpler and clearer to see that the best engineers and scientists and farmers and teachers and plumbers and artists are super creative when they're doing that toggling.
I am always trying to tell people this about the importance of creativity in just about any job and certainly any knowledge work job. And, even in the world of medicine, you,
Absolutely, in the world of medicine.
yeah.
Can I share? I actually I'm giving a talk on Saturday morning to a group of physicians and healthcare providers who are experts in sleep medicine. And I'm going to start by referencing my love of the work of fiction writer and physician Abraham Verghese. Abraham Verghese is a an accomplished physician, surgeon, and he got into the Iowa Writers School program.
So just Natalie, Dr. Verghese is actually an infectious disease specialist.
Oh, excuse me, he's an
Yes.
infectious disease specialist. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So, and he's a very good one. He loves what he does. But just because my father is a surgeon, I always have to make the
Oh,
distinction.
okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So he's an infectious disease specialist and a phenomenal writer and storyteller. And a lot of his characters are surgeons. And one of the gifts of reading his books for me has been to appreciate the creativity that physicians have of defining the problem. Physicians and the work of excellent physicians is a great model of wonder and rigor. The rigor is their training in medicine, in anatomy, in research. And then the wonder is, especially for surgeons, you get into the body and you don't know what you're going to find. And so to be able to improvise in the moment and discern what is the best thing for this human being, this person, they're not just a collection of components and parts, but what is the best way to help them heal and to help them immediately and in his books that the first one I read, Cutting for Stone, took place in Ethiopia in the 70s and 80s, and then I'm almost finished the Covenant of Water takes place in India, and it's just a phenomenal example of the creative capacity of doctors, of physicians, in if we apply that wonder rigor theory. It's so clear.
Oh, absolutely. That is such a great point. And I want to go back to something else you said that I had actually made a note of when I read your book, and that is the concept of back casting. And I want you to describe that a little bit more. Tell us how an individual could do that on their own, how they could practice back casting, because I think it is a way of building resilience as well.
It totally is a way of building resilience. And I captured the idea of backcasting in terms of something I call your inventory of courage. And backcasting is an important skill to have so that we can gain perspective in order to take steps forward. And so here's how your inventory of courage works. So backcasting is reflection, it's memory, it's, metacognition, what I think, the way I think about XYZ. But in a concrete way, backcasting helps to build this inventory of courage. So what I mean by that is I shared a story in the book about being bullied. Um, when I was in elementary school, I'm from Philly. I started out in urban Philly public schools where unfortunately, and a lot of the social playground environments, you have to know how to fight. And I hated fighting and I was horrible at fighting. So I made sure I had friends who knew how to fight. And I only recently I realized I was kind of a strategic little 6-year-old because I knew that much that I better make friends with kids who knew how to fight. Well, anyway, I showed up at school every day smelling like Jergens lotion and my hair combed and a nice freshly packed bag of lunch. And I was assigned to sit next to a little girl who hated my guts. She didn't smell clean all the time and she bullied me. And as an adult, I get it. I get why she hated my guts. But one day in the school playground, we were, the bell rings and we're lining up to go into the school building, and she busts in front of me in line. And she'd done that before. And this time I stared at the back of her head and I thought, she can't keep doing this to me. So I tapped her on the back of her shoulder and I politely said, "Excuse me, but you busted in front of me in line." And she turned to me and she said, "What you gonna do? Kick my butt?" And turned her back on me. And I thought, I said, and like 6-year-old me did say, but I thought today is not the day. She is not going to do that. So I went to the back of the line. I took a running start and I kicked her in the back of her behind. And she toppled over. She stared back at me, startled, and she never bothered me again. Now, the reason that story matters is because when I think about what gave me the cockamamie idea to leave a 16-year career in academia and give this idea of figure eight thinking a try, even though at the time it was just a side hustle. What in God's name made me think that I could ever earn a PhD in 4 years while working full time? Why the heck did I ever think that I could start a hat design business while also being a middle school English teacher in a place like New York City, out of the room in an apartment at well, it was a nice brownstone but I had a room in this brownstone I shared with two other people. When I trace back, like what gave me the courage to do that, it really started on that playground when I was 6 years old. And so everyone has their seed of their inventory of courage, which now it looks like, oh, you've done all these great things and you've started this and you've tried XYZ. But it started probably when you were a child and you naively, maybe not so naively, in my case, I was very naive, decided to stand up for yourself. And there's this line in a film, I did a doodle of this quote. It's a great film called Hearts Beat Loud. And there's a line in dialogue in the film where one character says to the other, "You got to be brave before you're good." We have to be brave and take a chance on ourselves before we are actually good. And the way this ties all back to move, think, rest, and this human operating system to flourish so that you can build a capacity for creativity and so that you can do your best work, is that you actually can't be brave before you're good. You actually can't acknowledge understand where the seed of your inventory of courage is until you pause and you reflect and you do that back casting. If you're not still, you actually can't garner the ammunition that you need to fortify yourself and others and move forward. And it's not just individuals who can identify their inventory of courage. Teams can do this. Companies, organizations have an inventory of courage.
Yeah, and as you're talking, I'm seeing the way that these themes and concepts move, think, rest, they're intertwined. And you can't look at one without another, because they all feed into each other. And I like
Yes.
the way you've put this all together in one framework. I want to talk now about the rest portion with the knowledge that, that's not disconnected from everything else we're talking about here. And I think that's really, really important. And the other thing that's really important is taking breaks and taking time for adequate rest. I mean, as a physician, I have seen people literally, I mean, literally killing themselves, working themselves to death because they refuse to take breaks and they refuse to get adequate rest. And interestingly enough, most of these people whom I know are actually in charge of their own time. They set their own
Wow,
they set their
interesting.
own schedules, they choose their own careers, and they're doing this because I really think it's a society-wide, as you call it, addiction with busyness, and a society-wide value system that places value on just being busy all the time, and you can't take a break and you can't rest because you'll fall behind, or you're being lazy, or you're not being productive, or all these other things that people are worried about. And so I would love it if you would read that excerpt we talked about from your book on this concept.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to do that. So I'm reading from page 140, bottom of 140 to 142. So, how and why did we stray so far from this good advice about rest? The same survey found that we're still not even taking lunch breaks, even though 94% of employees felt happier when they took a lunch break during the day and agreed that it gives them the opportunity to step back and gain perspective on their work. I think it's because we have a busyness addiction. And like with all addictions, the satiation is only temporary and the consequences are negative. They include a loss of control and self neglect, as well as, ironically, missing the details in our lives and work and not paying attention to anything with deep, intentional focus. Northwestern University's Adam Waits, a management professor, has written that once upon a time, leisure was a sign of prestige. Today, that idea has been turned on its head, and busyness is the new status symbol. I couldn't agree more. London-based social scientist Katie Jean pointed out in one of her essays on Medium that people in the world's wealthiest countries don't believe they have time to rest. She muses that taking almost a month off from work is normal in Europe, but Americans refuse to take time off. 58% of people say because of money, but also because it compromises their perceived work ethic. With an addiction to being busy and appearing busy, life takes on a surface, survival only quality. This can ultimately be catastrophic. Neuroscientist and Stanford University professor Robert Sapolsky makes this point by comparing the body to a house. Suppose the owner only focuses on and prepares it for external events that are or seem to be unavoidable, like hurricanes or heavy rainfall. In that case, he will likely neglect the necessary maintenance, and eventually the house will become a ruin. A 2023 article in Money Magazine by Pete Grieve cited that Americans work almost 400 more hours per year than their German professional counterparts. And a 2021 World Health Organization report pointed to higher risk of stroke, heart disease, and ultimately death due to overworking. We've gotten ourselves wound up in what Michelle Braden calls a cycle of dissatisfaction, where we tie self-worth to accomplishments. But what if we suspended judgment and attempted the following thought experiment? Instead of tying our self-worth to what we accomplished, what if we tied it to what we were cultivating? This would direct us toward a dynamic focus on process instead of a static emphasis on results. Such a mental model would require greater individual and organizational self awareness and the inside out work I mentioned in chapter 4. It would require us to push back on hustle and grind culture and all the mantras to which we've become accustomed. Just do it. Push through. Grind now, shine later. Every day I'm hustling, hustling, hustling. These mantras keep us in survival mode. But if you're just surviving, that's a mindset based on competition, fear, and there never being enough. You see, I don't believe there is any such thing as competition. As much as scrolling through social media and Instagram would have you and me think otherwise. And those moments of malleable self-judgment, the sage words of Theodore Roosevelt, comparison is the thief of joy, ring true. The reason I don't believe in competition has to do with an interview I read decades ago from a Grammy Award-winning musician. She said that she did not believe in competition because, to paraphrase, everyone has access to the same 8 notes in an octave. I have my technical training and you have yours. I have my God-given talent and you have yours. I can't do what you would do with that, and you cannot do what I would do. Wow. I was floored by that insight and have never forgotten it. What if we all thought like that? What if we shifted away from a single focus, competitive survival mode to a multidimensional, creative, flourishing mode? One of the results would be to ease up on a furious race to the end and instead refocus on more self compassion and the MTR or motor activities that relax and renew our bodies and minds on our own time frame and under our own conditions. Getting more intentional about rest, engaging in activity without purpose, and embracing the ambiguity and blurred boundaries of liminal spaces, both as individuals and within our organizations, would help us to do that.
Thank you, Natalie. I absolutely love that. And
Thank
I want
you.
to ask you now, after reading that and all of us hearing it, if someone wants to put this into practice, they have, overwhelmed themselves, and many people are, and maybe they're in the 70% facing burnout, experiencing that. What is the first concrete step they could take toward, you know, making things better for themselves?
Well, like with all addictions, in this case, we're talking about addictions to busyness. The first step is to admit that one has a problem, right? Is to be able to zoom out and acknowledge, wow, I've just been sitting at this desk since I got here in the morning to around lunchtime, and then I have the nerve to eat my lunch at the desk. That's a problem. That actually will not enable you to do your best work. So the first step is to acknowledge you have a problem. The second step is to intentionally add buffer zones into your calendar. So I have in my calendar buffer spaces. Sometimes it's just for me to be able to step away from my desk, close everything next. I have to do something else that's outside the house for the remainder of the afternoon or something like that. But I also have those buffer zones to take a daydream break. I literally will stand by a window with my phone set for 90 seconds and I will just stare out the window. I'll look at it, floating cloud, in a tall office building. I just kind of look at the pattern of people walking down on the street. Um, Sometimes I will take one of my quick walks. I think the other reason why people aren't moving, just walking more, because we have in our mind, we have to walk for 30 minutes or an hour. We have these extended amounts of time that we think it should take. And I have a walk that I know will take me 5 minutes. I have a walk that I know will take me 9 minutes. If I have the luxury of the day, I have a walk that I know will take me 30 minutes. But today I did my 5 minute walk, and there was a moment where I was just kind of looking up at the beautiful blue fall November sky. And I thought I was seeing in the sky the outline of a plane, and it was a beautiful flock of birds. They were so far away, but they had that incredible formation that a flock knows how to do. And then they dispersed and they came back together, and it was just this beautiful moment of awe. Like, how do they do that? And it's probably it gave me that dopamine hit that we used to get when we were toddlers and we discovered something for the first time and we just wanted to see it over and over again. We need those dopamine hits, those hits of the positive serotonin and positive hormones to help us reset. So, and don't set yourself up for failure by saying, "Oh, I don't have 30 minutes to go for a walk." All right, I can't afford to do a 30-minute lunch break. Okay, can you do 20 minutes and don't have your phone with you and sit somewhere quietly, eat peacefully, and then go back to the work? So those are the two things I would say to start with is to just acknowledge that there's an issue, and secondly, put in the time and with the exception of the daydream break, I just need the timer. Don't bring your phone with you. Don't listen to a podcast when you go on that walk. Just walk and feel the air on your cheeks and hear do a sound audit and hear, oh, that was a car braking, or that's the crunching of the leaves, or that's an airplane overhead. But those are two ways to just to get started.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. And I know we're going to have to wrap up soon. I could talk to you for a long time about all of this, but let's look at wrapping this up. And I have a final question that I ask all my guests. But before we get to that, I want to ask you one more thing, and is that do you have anything more you'd like to add? And what do you really hope that readers will take away from this book?
I think I love your questions. I really am grateful that you invited me to read from a segment of the book. I don't really, excuse me, have anything to add. My hope with this book is that it is a provocation, and it is a provocation that leads people to action, and that they will discover when they read the book that it's very prescriptive nonfiction. So there are reflection questions and exercises at the end of every single chapter to help you begin to implement these ideas. I really love to practice what I preach and practice wonder and rigor in my work. So I want to provoke you with new big ideas, but I also want to help you make this real. And so the rigor was my work to what are some exercises that I can give individuals and teams and organizations to begin to implement this into their lives and work. So I hope that people, when they read Move, Think, Rest, will try these exercises and these reflections and stay in touch with me and let me know how it's going.
And listeners, I have read the entire book cover to cover, and Natalie's right. She has got both the science behind it, the thoughts behind it, as well as concrete steps, action steps you can take in every single chapter. And even at the end of the book, there is a 66-day motor challenge, MTR challenge, there with lots of great ideas there. There is a motor bingo, little motor bingo you could do. She even has a soundscape that she's created with playlists for the different phases of move, think, and rest. So this is a really well done book. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank
Uh,
you.
One last question, my final question, because the motto of positive vibes is keep on the sunny side. So, Natalie, how do you keep on the sunny side?
For me, it really starts with movement. I don't get to this every single morning, but I really try to stretch. I'm a lifelong dancer. Last night, I went with a friend to a West Coast swing dance class and an open dance party, which we had never been before. And it just brought me so much joy. So movement through dance, through swimming, these are the ways that I stay on the sunny side.
Oh, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. And thank you again for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.